This is The Complete Creative, the podcast for creative pros who want success without sacrificing what matters most. I'm Bree Stockwell, life coach to creative professionals who love meaningful work and a complete life. Each week, we talk about what it actually takes to create your intentional life, where your health, relationships, meaningful creative work, and your inner peace joyfully coexist. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. So I'm recording this from my porch on my last full day in this house. So there's actually a leaf blower down the street. I used to just have birds, but I'm not going to edit out any background noise because I kind of like hearing all the sounds of the back porch. And I'm really loving this, being out in nature and recording. So maybe expect more of these. The reason I'm recording this on my back porch, it's because it's the last full day in our house here in Austin, Texas. We close on our house tomorrow and hand over the keys to a lovely family. And we will be closing this chapter of living in Texas. And I'm excited for our next adventures. But I didn't want to move on to the next thing without taking some time to reflect. That's my dog, not editing that out either, to reflect. And I've been doing this lately, like thinking about all the memories I've had here and also how I've grown over the process of selling our house. It's taken almost a year. And at first it felt kind of stressful for a variety of reasons, which I'll explain. And it has shifted into feeling like more of an easy process. And it has nothing to do with anything externally and all to do with how I'm looking at the situation and how I'm thinking about it. It's taught me a lot about how I can navigate big transitions in the future and how I want to do that. Let me give you a little bit of backstory about what led us to this moment in time. So a few years ago, I had mentioned to my husband that I thought it would be fun to rent our house out maybe for 6 months to a year and just kind of go travel full time. And I think it took him a little while for him to think about that. You know, I think these big decisions maybe can sometimes take time to settle in, especially like if you're giving up the comfort of a home base. And also, we have been traveling during the holidays, like Christmas time, for the past few years for two reasons. One is we have family out of state. And also, during that time, December, January, we have what we call cedar fever here, which is all the cedar trees just produce massive amounts of pollen, which my husband suffers terribly from. He's super allergic and he's pretty miserable. So it's so much better if we can leave and then we can go play in the snow somewhere because Texas doesn't usually have snow, at least not any to play in. Because of those things, we have been, when we leave town, we actually have been extending for like longer and longer amounts of time. And 2 winters ago on our way back home, we had been gone for maybe 2.5 months or something like that. And we thought, yeah, okay, this is doable. Let's sell the house and we will travel full time. So the plan was made while we were on our 1-day drive home that we would come back and prepare our house for selling and eventually put all of our things we wanted to keep into a pod, which is like a big container that gets stored somewhere. And it's movable if we ever decide to move it. And we would only keep the things that we loved and that we would go to places that we really loved and have so much more flexibility, not being tied to a house and having to come back to Texas. We can just go anywhere, kind of anywhere we want to. So that's kind of how we got here. But I mentioned it's been a year process. So the market has been kind of slow in Austin, Texas. In fact, last year, as soon as we listed our house, we're like, oh my gosh, Austin is kind of the hardest hit market in the country, and things were not selling, and we would like see things get sold, the houses get sold, and we're like, why isn't our house selling? And what's funny is we've sold 2 other houses. I'm sorry, that blower is getting louder and louder if you can hear it. So we've sold 2 other houses, and those went super fast and they were super easy. And I thought that was my experience, is you put your house up for sale and people just come by it and it's super easy to leave. And when that didn't happen right away, I was at first I was kind of confused. I'm like, what is happening? I started getting frustrated. Like, why isn't this house selling? What is happening here? And one of the things I've been working on ditching in my life is this feeling of frustration, because I don't love it. And it means kind of I'm not at my best self. So anytime I feel that bubbling up, I'm like, it's time for me to look inward. So I knew it was time for me to look inward and find out what actually is happening. One of the things that I discovered when I looked inward was that I was feeling very impatient. I felt it, like the impatience rising. Some of the questions that I felt myself asking was like, why is this taking so long? What can I do to make this happen faster? Because I'm one of those people, like, I make the plan and then I go do it. And so when there is a circumstance that requires someone else to be involved in the process, then it maybe complicates things, but it changes the situation. So I know that I can only control what I can control. One of my cues when I started asking these questions was, how can I make this go faster? And anytime I have, like, the word make feels so much like force, how can I force this into existence? And the universe doesn't work like that. When I start feeling like I'm forcing things, I'm discovering that is the time for me to step backwards. So what's interesting is, I don't know if you're into human design or the gene keys. If you are, message me on Instagram. I'm at Creative Minds Coach, and I'd love to chat about it. And if you're not and you have questions about what it is, you can also message me and I'll kind of explain. But so gene key 5 is called patience. And this one appears in my profile in my evolution sphere, if you know anything about this. And your evolution is your core life challenge and growth edge. When I started reading more about this, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense, that the universe, you can call it the divine, whatever, I've been given this as something for my own personal growth. And I feel personally that it is not a coincidence. I want to read you a little bit about this gene key. And I'm so sorry about the blowers in the background if you can hear them. Okay, so in gene key number 5, the shadow is impatience. And of course, the gift, if you know anything about gene keys, is patience. And what's interesting in the book by Richard Rudd called The Gene Keys, patience is called the library of light. And here's what he says. Patience is about trust. These 2 words have very similar meanings. If you trust in life, you will trust in every moment, even the challenging moments. And in doing so, you will always remain in the flow. And so one of the things that I wanted was I wanted this experience to be easier. I wanted to feel more ease in the experience, because when I felt this frustration rising, I was like, wait a minute, what experience do I actually want to have here? And it wasn't frustration, impatience, making it, feeling hard, feeling forced, right? All of those things that make it not enjoyable, like the process not enjoyable. And so I'm interested in doing more things with flow and ease and just having a better time in life in general. So when I was reading this And in doing so, you will always remain in the flow. I was like, oh yeah, so how can I have patience? How can I create more patience? And so to finish this off, Richard Rudd in the book says, above all, the gift of patience allows you to hear life's music. I was a music major, and so music is very important in my life. And I was like, yes, because it's like the beautiful part of life. So when the gift of patience allows me to hear life's music, then it says it tunes you into the subtle metronome behind your life. It allows you to breathe deeply into your belly and never feel trapped by your outer life situation. And I was totally feeling this. Patience smooths rough edges, like the rough edges of frustration, keeps your heart and mind open, and makes life seem simple and easy. And it was like a light bulb went off, and I was like, yes, that's what I want. I want it to feel simple and easy. And the last part here says, when you become impatient, even for a moment, you have stopped listening and trusting in the greater life. For these reasons, it is patience that has always been the true gauge and measure of the greatness of a person's soul. And these words are so beautiful to me, because I'm like, yes, this is what I want more of. So now how can I lean into that? Using any feelings of impatience, when I started feeling like that hurried feeling, like the shortness of breath, the frustration, all of that comes with frustration and impatience, I used that as a cue to have an awareness that I was feeling impatient, and then remember these words and shift into the simpleness and the ease. Okay, how can I make this feel easier right now? How can I trust in this process, and that the right buyer, it doesn't even have to be the perfect buyer, that a buyer is speeding their way to me, that the process is already working, that I am in the process of it's working already, really trusting that the universe was providing for me, even if I didn't have the real tangible physical evidence. Sort of felt a little delusional, but also felt really good in the moment to just remember that, yes, I don't need to force this because it is already happening. And also checking in with myself. Have I done all that needs to be done? Yes. Is there anything else I could do? Answering those questions, but letting all that I had done be enough, and then doing the other part of trusting that it's working, that it is okay, and all will be okay. What this kind of looked like in practice was when we would get a showing request, because there's all kinds of little things you have to do to make the house look really perfect for someone to come look. And then we would leave, and then we would get, the feedback of oh, hey, they like this, but not this, or oh, this wasn't right for them. And instead of feeling frustrated, I started going, okay, but seeing the good parts of the potential buyer visit, and then sending those buyers well wishes in their buying journey, even if my home wasn't for them, but also not ruling them out. They could come back, and switching out of the disappointment into it is working. I am in the process. There has to be all of these things that happen in my process, right? It didn't happen in my other houses, but that's what's happening here until it did work. And we haven't closed yet, but I'm trusting that will happen tomorrow. Also, on the flip side, visualizing our potential buyer and knowing that they're on their way, and sending them well wishes in their buying journey on their way to us. What I have learned from this process over the year is that I don't need to stress. Stress and worry and doubt and concern about selling the house is all optional. And I can now take this with me into other situations and other life transitions. It's really so good. Like, I have grown so much from this particular thing. So learning patience, or learning to be in more patience, has really helped my personal growth. One other huge thing that I have also learned in this process is through the experience of releasing the home over time. I feel so great now about letting the home go. I've had so much time to practice releasing. Also, even though over the past 10 years, every couple of years, I would like go through my house and kind of, reevaluate all of my things. When you're leaving a big house and consolidating into like a pod, I knew I had to let things go and more things go. And so part of the initial process was to let a lot more things go. And I was surprised at what I was so attached to and what I wasn't. Some of the things that I was attached to were kind of hard to release. And I really had to allow myself a lot of grace for not judging myself for wanting those things or feeling so attached. And also doing the work of letting them go because I knew they no longer in service to me. One of the things that was kind of funny that I think a lot of one friend in particular was surprised that I had such an easy time letting it go because I wasn't attached, is way back when I had a scrapbooking era. And so I have all of these homemade scrapbooks, and they were just taking up space. And, no one really sits there and looks at them all. And so I actually was like, yeah, I'm going to digitize these and then get rid of them. And my friend was like, wait a minute, you just threw them away? I'm like, yeah, I just threw them away because I could feel they were no longer in service to me. I kind of want to keep the memory of them and, some of the photos, and I think it's great. And the digital space is it's kind of minimal, right? But I don't need the space and I don't need those things. And so those were kind of easy to let go. And I was surprised at how easy it was. That kind of was a surprise to me. The other part of this releasing process was when I had feelings come up of when I would go on a walk and I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be here. Like releasing the location, releasing the home, releasing my attachment to needing to be able to call my friends, although I think that is important. And I know that the friends I have here in Texas will be my friends, right? That I'll be able to see them again and we will stay in touch. But like releasing the thought that I can just call somebody up and like go to the movies, So I'll have to make those quick connections elsewhere, but also making plans for myself to stay tied to the connections that I really want. And so giving myself a lot of grace when I could feel those emotions bubbling to the surface, letting myself feel them, not avoiding them, sometimes having tears, but also using it as a time to breathe and remind myself I chose this. Letting that be part of the ease of the journey was to feel and experience the emotions rather than fight against them, to force them to go away. Here, I also want to talk about, when I talk about the releasing, one of the things that I have learned is to, and this is through my coach, is to consider having preferences over needing the thing or needing things to go a certain way. And so my husband and I now say to each other, we prefer that the home sells faster, but if it doesn't, that's okay too. So not being attached to a timeline, letting things fall into place, knowing that we can navigate anything. A coach, her name's Jody Moore, a friend reminded me of this recently. She says, everything is figure outable. And I like to remind myself of that. Like, hey, everything is figure outable. Right now we have some car logistics and I'm like, hey, everything is figure outable. And it feels so much easier. This is just very recent, but something that I've noticed is that because I have practiced all of this, learning to release more quickly, going through the emotional process of releasing, is that right now, I can feel that I don't have this huge energy drain. I have the energy to record this podcast episode. Over the past week, my husband and I have made a lot of decisions. I've had to make a lot of decisions. What stays, what goes in the pod, what gets thrown away, all of these things. Who can I find that wants this? A lot of quick decisions. And I've been able to make them more clearly and more easily because I've been practiced, because I know how to do this faster. I don't feel that net energy drain, which feels really amazing. If you want to hear more about my thoughts on decision making and energy and how those relate to each other, I recorded a podcast episode about it, and I'll put a link in the episode notes so that you can go listen to that one if you are so inclined. But finish this one first, because don't you want to hear the end? The cumulative of learning to have more patience in the process and letting things happen in the right timing, learning to trust and releasing the timeline, and also releasing of the things more easily, not feeling so attached, has been so, so helpful to me on this journey. And I know it's going to be so useful for me moving forward in I don't know what situations. I look forward to those surprises, probably when I least expect it, but then I will have those skills to draw upon when I need them. On this back porch, birds replaced the blower, and I don't even know if you can hear it, but for me, it's nice. I love sitting back here and hearing the birds. Of course, things are actually feeling so perfect right now. And I can't imagine how I would feel if I had felt stress up until this last moment. And I kind of feel like I'm winning right now because I have personally allowed things to fall into place as they were meant to, as they were meant for me, for this next buyer, in the right timing. It just all actually feels so amazing. And I'm really grateful that I was able to let the frustration go, really grow from this feeling of impatience, and then use it as a tool for my own personal expansion. My question to you is, where in your life are you holding onto a timeline or an outcome right now? Where are you holding it very tightly? Can you release your hold on it from forcing something? Just let your hold go a little bit more. Like, what are you holding on to that you could let ease and trust take over? What would it feel like to practice more ease instead of forcing something? And that is more of what I'm going to be asking myself in more situations as they arise, as we pack up our car later tonight. And we'll be in the area for another week. We're going to stay with some lovely friends who've opened their home to us so we can just tidy up all the last bits, but and also spend time with friends because that is also important to us. Thank you so much for being here for this journey. And I will catch you in the next one when I am on the road. So stay tuned for my next location. I already know it, but I'll let you be surprised. All right. I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.